Can't keep holding on to what's already gone. Can't keep holding on to what's already gone. Holding on, holding on, holding on to what's already gone.
So for this melody, this chord progression is actually pretty simple. We're in a scale of C minor and it only has 3 chords. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to make that chord progression. So the first chord starts off with a C minor ninth. So it starts off with this and then it goes into a B flat. And then it repeats without the F on top. And then finally we end it on an A flat. And then we repeat again back to our B flat. And then the last chord without the F on top. And that's literally it for this chord progression. Super simple, doesn't require a lot of skills or notes. So now we're gonna go in FL and I'm gonna show you how easy it is to make a melody like this. And as you can see, this chord progression is super simple. There's really nothing complicated, no crazy embellishments, no crazy chords. This one is straight to the point. So the first sound that I started off with is this pad from Omnisphere, and I'm using this Luscious Airwaves wide pad. This is how it sounds. Sometimes simplicity is the key. For this, we're using the same mixer that I always use, which is this Fruity Chorus, this Fruity Flingus, this EQ to take out the highs and the lows, and then last but not least, we're using the Stereo Shaper. So after adding this, we went and added a bass, and the bass that I'm using is straight out of Contact. I'm using the Rickenbacker bass, and as you can see, it's not even on a mixer, so I have no presets on it. And all I'm doing is just following the root notes. So for this melody, I'm pretty sure that I sent it to my friend Radha, just like this, and she ended up sending me back some vocals. And this is the first vocals that we originally had.
We ain't seeing eye to eye. Guess forever was a lie. I've been searching for a sign, searching for a sign. It's like heaven's out of reach.
We originally were going to do like a long intro type of situation. We ended up scratching everything. She ended up doing this, the first part, which was.
Can't keep holding on.
So as soon as she did that, I was like, I have an idea. I'm just going to follow the pattern that she's doing and we're just going to build on top of that. So we literally said, forget everything else. And what I did is I just added those beginning chords to go inside of this. And this is how it sounds. And I don't have the plugin that I originally made the strings with. It was Opus, but Opus is too big, so I ended up deleting it. It was taking like 1 terabyte space on my storage and I just couldn't afford that. So I did these chords leading into the C minor chord and it's just kind of like going up and then it's going down. So this is how it sounds. And I just added some strings just so you get an idea of how it would sound. And the library that I use is from East West. It's Opus and it's the Hollywood strings. I just don't have it anymore. So thankfully, I ended up rendering out the strings because I knew I was going to delete Opus at some point. So this is what we had, and you're going to see how she's just following this exact chord progression and how it makes it feel like this big thing.
And keep holding on to what's already gone.
And all these sounds right here are just strings from Opus. And like I said, I just don't have Opus anymore. So this is what we had for this section. Really nothing crazy, but it just sounded like this big thing. The next part was to kind of lead into a different section because I felt like it just needed some extra to it. So what I ended up doing is I ended up putting the same vocals inside of this mixer. And this mixer is just this RX 950 that you could see I abuse. And then I'm also using this reverb just to really duck the vocals inside of the sample for this specific section. And then I also have her vocals again, and this time I'm just processing it a little bit different. I'm still keeping that same reverb and that same 950, but this time I'm adding a little bit of a delay. I'm using this volume from Shaperbox, and then I'm also using the panning feature. As you can see, I have both of the mixes at 100. So then I ended up going to Lounge Lizard, and this is probably one of the best Rhodes. I tend to use it a lot in my production. The preset that I have on there is just this reverb and then this EQ in order to take out a lot of the lows. And I think it's one of the best sounding Rhodes. It just has a specific sound to it, and I thought it would be super useful for this breakdown. So then I ended up going to Omnisphere for this section. I have this softest grand piano, and the only thing that I did is just put this sound shifter that's pitching the piano down 12 semitones, and I'm also playing it an octave higher. And then I also have this vintage verb and then this flingus, which is on the default preset. Once you have that sound shifter on the piano, it's able to make your piano sound like this. So it kind of gives it like a smoother vibe, and I thought that was needed for this section in order to give the sample a little bit more body. So this is what we had so far. And one thing that I want to emphasize for the Rhodes, I did switch up a little bit. And the only thing that I added is this right here, this A sharp, to come in a little bit quicker than like playing it like this. And I thought it just added a little bit more swag to it and just made it feel like a little bit better. The next sound was from Analog Lab, and I'm using the first preset. The only thing that I did is just lower the brightness, and I ended up putting this EQ to take out a lot of the highs. And then last but not least, I'm using this flingus. I ended up going to Omnisphere, and I'm using this preset that I always use. And I have that same exact mixer preset, which is just the chorus, the flingus, the EQ to take out the highs and the lows, and then this to make the sound wider. I ended up layering some more sounds for the section. I ended up going back to Omnisphere, and this time I'm using this pad right here. The only thing that I have on there for the mixer is just this EQ to take out the highs and the lows. And then I ended up going to Trillion, and I'm using this simple Dark Saw preset, and I'm pretty sure I'm taking out a lot of the highs. And then I ended up adding the strings one more time for this section. So this is what we had. And then for this section right here, I just ended up freestyling some embellishments. It's really nothing crazy. It's just to add a little flavor to the actual sample. Really nothing crazy. This is how it sounds. And then leading into this last section, I ended up changing all of the pads, and this time I'm using some different pads. So the first pad that I have is this Buttery Keys. And then I'm layering it with this pad from Omnisphere, which is Love on the Edge. And I tend to use that pad a lot especially when I'm using it for outros. What I have for the buttery keys is just this fruity flingus and then this EQ. And then for the outro pad, which is the Love on the Edge pad, I'm using this reverb. And as you can see, I have my mix pretty high up. And then I'm also using the shaper box in order to kind of get rid of some of the volume and then also panning it a little bit. And then the very last sound that I ended up adding is just this pad from Omnisphere, and this is called Distant Memories. It kind of has a cool sound to it, kind of like a ARP. So this is what we had for the outro. And then another sound that I added, which is just the same vocals, I just pitched it up a whole octave. And this time on the mixer preset, I'm using this RX 950 and then this vintage verb and then the Shep 73 in order to get rid of the low end. And then this EQ to kind of get rid of some frequencies that I didn't like. And then last but not least, I'm using this to put it in a space. And I think that plays a big part. I'm using the shaper box one more time to kind of mess with the volume so it's not too much in your face. And I have the mix at 65. And then I'm panning it left and right. And one thing that you can take away from this sample is how I'm using a lot of texture sounds just to make it feel like it's somewhere, and it just adds a lot of atmosphere to it. So then I ended up going to a new FLP, and this time I exported the stems, and as you can see, the stems look like a lot, but it's really not. It's just kind of like the same sounds on top of each other in order to make it sound big. So then I ended up starting off with the kick, and this was the first sound that I used. And then I added this rim, which is just following the basic pattern. And then I added some hi-hats. And then I added this open hat, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then I added this scratch right here. Last but not least, I ended up adding this 808. So altogether, this is what we had.
Can't keep holding on to what's already gone. Can't keep holding